So we move on to the second part of our FO exclusive. How are Ukrainian and Russian war economies doing now? So one view is that Russia is doing rather well. The Russian economy has fared better than usual. Russia has developed new trade ties with the global south. According to the state newswire RIA Novosti, trade with China increased 32% year on year in the first 8 months of 2023. So first 8 months till August, trade with China up 32%, and it has reached $155 billion. Trade with India in 2023, first half of the year, so first 6 months, January to June, has tripled to $33 billion. So India and China are clearly funding the Russian economy or fueling the Russian economy. The argument goes this way. Poor countries need cheap Russian resources and Russian solutions, whether it is Russian missiles or radars or technologies, particularly in the defense realm, or AK-47s or AKs of another vintage, assault Kalashnikov rifles, which remain my favorite rifles. I guess, Glenn, you've also said you prefer the AK to everything else.
I did. It's robust, simple, easy to maintain. It is less accurate than its counterpart, the contemporary, the M16. But I was never in combat, so I don't want to overstate, the relevance of my views, I suppose. But the accuracy was at a distance so far away that I could not see anything anymore. So that struck me as irrelevant. When something within my literal eyesight, the AK-47 was as good, and it continued to fire even if it was dropped in a pile of mud. So yeah, it's better.
So, given the fact that Russia has resources and solutions like AK-47, it has had a low slowdown, and the private economy is still functioning successfully. The International Monetary Fund, the IMF, has forecast that Russia's GDP will grow by 1.5% this year and 1.3% in 2024. Now, of course, Russian President Vladimir Putin was more bullish. He's always more bullish. He predicted 2.8% growth this year, more than double his own cabinet's prediction in April. And, more importantly is Oleg Deripaska. Now, Oleg Deripaska is the founder of leading aluminium producer Rusal, and he met the Financial Times, and he says that the Wunderwaffe, the wonder weapon of weaponizing the financial system against Russia, has not worked. And that was sanctions, that was cutting Russia off SWIFT, that was oil embargoes, export embargoes, and so on and so forth. Some say that, like the US, Russia is a fortress economy. It has grain, it has oil and gas, it has metals, it has a decent defense industry, and enough highly skilled engineers. So Russia will be fine. At the same time, we must remember that Russia has too many state enterprises with low productivity, low utilization, and low wages. And they are nowhere the modern economy of semiconductors and so on and so forth. And so Russia might be doing all right, but it's not. But it's still fundamentally a natural resource and a defense industry economy. Now, in contrast, the Ukrainian GDP crashed by 30% in 2022. It's expected to grow by only 0.5% in 2023. There are 7.1 million additional Ukrainians estimated to be living in poverty. There's been a 15-year setback in poverty reduction goals. Ukraine needs $11 billion for repairs and essential services in 2023. Nearly 6 million Ukrainian refugees are now in different parts of Europe, while an estimated 8 million others are internally displaced within the country. And these are figures from May 2022. These have gone up, by the way, since 2023. Many Ukrainians who were volunteers have also left the country. I know of 2 or 3 of them. They've got demoralized. They are in safer havens. They've gone back to jobs, paying jobs, which they did. So it's an interesting phenomenon as to what happens next, because the economic strains on one country seem to be much greater than the other. And over to you, Glenn, for your analysis and your view, because I have a more pessimistic view on Ukraine, of course, given the given my reading of the economy.
Well, clearly, without Western assistance, financial and material, Ukraine would now be part of Russia. And the Ukrainians would either become Russian or it would cease to exist. It's that ruthless situation. As I looked at this problem, I found that I was a bit surprised. And the problem that I'm thinking of is how assessing the effect of Western sanctions on the Russian economy, and then more broadly the performance and prospects for the Russian economy. Now, there are a lot of strains. It's not an easy economic, financial, therefore social, political, or technological set of circumstances for Russia, and things are getting worse with each day. However, the broad conclusion, as you say, Atul, is on the whole positive, relatively positive for Russia. Russia, it appears, can sustain this level of commitment to the war in Ukraine as far in the future as political stability will allow it and Putin will decide to pursue it. The demands on the Russian economy of the current war in Ukraine are less as a percentage of GDP than what the United States committed to the war in Korea in 1950 to 53. Now, the United States was the richest country in the world by far at that time, and Russia is not. So that comparison is slightly misleading, but is also revelatory in the relatively small demands that the strains of the war are putting onto the Russian economy. Now, it's true that interest rates have had to go up to 13% to fight inflation. Inflation figures are wildly different. The estimates, the World Bank's assessment is 6.7% for Russia. Some think that is dramatically understated. But we do know, at the least, that the inflationary pressures on Russia are substantial. The currency has dropped by 35% in the last year, and the pressure on the currency remains significant. And that is really because of the sanctions secondarily, I guess you could say, but primarily because of the shutting down of Russian exports of oil and gas, which it's Senator McCain, I think, who first famously said that Russia was a gas station with nuclear weapons, and that's pretty much the case of the economy. But the revenues are so huge from fossil fuels that Russia has become the 11th largest economy, I think, GDP in the world, which is surprising. And we're talking hundreds of billions of dollars per year. Even with the sanctions, because of India and China having increased, I think in India's case, by 1,000% its imports from Russia since the beginning of the war, Russia continues to earn substantial foreign revenues, although they are down, I think it's about 40%. It's down 43% actually year on year from 22 to 23, which is huge. Over time, the various indicators that Atul touched upon, several that I've mentioned, will bring about a lower rate of growth a lower capability of investing in R&D, and therefore maintaining or developing cutting-edge economic and technological sectors in the economy. Russia will fall behind, become relatively impoverished. But those things are medium to long term. So we're talking 3, 5, 10 years down the line. And 1 second, Atul. So I think the conclusion is that for the foreseeable future, if Putin can maintain control politically, which appears likely, Russia can continue the war more or less as long as it wants at this level. Probably not moving forward, but straining Ukraine to the limit, straining the Western coalition supporting him also to the limit, and the possibility for a Russian victory as a result of cracks or breaks in these alliances and commitments is real. Just as the prospect for a Ukrainian victory on the battlefield is also possible. But my net assessment was that Russia is unfortunately better off and more able to sustain a sustained conflict than I had thought was the case until I looked into this issue earlier in the week.
So following up to what Glenn said, yes, Russian currency has declined, but remember that Russia has pegged the ruble to gold. Russia does not just have oil and gas. It is true it's a gas station. It is true it has natural oil. It is true, along with Saudi Arabia, it is colluding or acting as a cartel to push oil prices up. They are over $90 per barrel, in fact. That is why inflationary pressures are worrying economists around the world. But the important thing is that Russia also has aluminum, zinc, gold, nickel. It's basically one of the biggest suppliers of commodities, actually the biggest supplier of commodities. It is the world's biggest nation, after all, or empire, whatever you want to call it. Just as America expanded to the Pacific during the 19th century, so did Russia. And they met, of course, in Alaska. And Alaska was Russian territory. The Russians sold it to the U.S. I'm sure they regret it today. They would have had a presence on the North American continent. So Russia, because of its size, has all these different commodities. And Brent crude actually is $96.92 per barrel. So Russia has...
And the break-even point for the Russian budget is estimated to be $100 a barrel. If the price of oil is at $100 a barrel, Russia can balance its budget.
Okay. So there we go. Added information. But the point is Russia also has gold. So Russia has now fixed its currency, 5,000 rubles, or had rather, I speak in the past tense. They had fixed it at 5,000 rubles per gram of gold in March, from March 28th to June 30th. Now, those sort of measures have allowed Russia to avoid economic implosion, because once there is an underlying value of gold backing the currency, they avoid it. Also, what has allowed Russia is the real demand from poorer countries. Poorer countries are unwilling to import inflation by adhering to the sanctions of the West, or rather pioneered by the US. Ukrainians, unfortunately, they lack the same amount of oil, gas, aluminum, zinc, nickel, gold, and so on and so forth. So they simply are reliant on Germany, on the US, on EU, and the big Western economies, Canada perhaps, Australia even, to foot the bill. And now there is fatigue, donor fatigue. In Europe, there's also fatigue when it comes to refugees. So Ukrainians are increasingly finding that they are having to make a hard sell. And there are now tensions, for instance, between Ukraine and Poland, Ukraine and Hungary. They were always there. Remember, these are not countries that were always terribly friendly. In 1956, when there was the great uprising in Budapest, Ukrainians have not forgotten that many of the tank commanders, Hungarians have not forgotten that many of the tank commanders were Ukrainian. Similarly, there are ethnic Hungarians within Ukraine, and Hungary still resents that loss of territory of ethnic Hungarians to Ukraine and even to Romania, although they have patched up things with Romania. So increasingly, both the frictions with their immediate neighbors, Western neighbors, and with other bigger powers are coming to the fore. Even in the US, a part of the reason there will be a government shutdown, there may be a government shutdown, and I think we'll have to analyze it next month, Glenn, is the blank check, as the Republicans say, to Ukraine. So as time passes, and the most important country to watch is Germany, where AfD now, which is Allianz für Deutschland, Alliance for Germany now.
Extreme right party.
It's a far-right party, yeah. It has higher poll ratings than the ruling SPD, the Social Democratic Party of the Chancellor. And so we are in a very curious position that the German economy, as we know, is in deep distress. That was my long piece, which you're all encouraged to read on Fair Observer. It'll be there in the description of the video below. The German economy is in acute distress. And so now the willingness of different countries to continue funding Ukraine, given extremely sticky allegations about Ukrainian corruption, are in question.
Well, on that very happy note,
we are predicting Russian victory from our economic analysis, that eventually the Ukrainians will just run out of money and support, which is perhaps a grim, sobering thought to end on.
Yeah, I'm not that firm, and I wouldn't go that far, but Russia's better off than economically than one would hope.
Brilliant. All right. We will see you next month. Thank you very much for joining us. Make sure you subscribe to our newsletter. Make sure you like this video, you subscribe to our channel, and you leave a comment below. Thank you very much from Fair Observer, from Atul Singh and Glenn Carl. Bye for now.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.